And now, my friends, I want to share with you a story in honor of Halloween. This one is entitled Revenge. There once was a woman who hated her neighbor, a single mother with a small child. As the child grew and learned to crawl, the woman would sometimes leave a pot of boiling water in the corridor, or a container full of bleach, or she'd just spread out a whole box of needles right there on the floor. The poor mother didn't suspect anything. Her little girl hadn't yet learned to walk, and she didn't let her out into the corridor during the winter when the floor was cold. But time was fast approaching when her daughter would be able to leave the room on her own. The mother would say to her neighbor, "Rhea, sweetie, you dropped your needles again." At which point Rhea would blame her poor memory. "I'm always forgetting things," she'd say. They had once been friends. Two unmarried women living in a communal apartment, they had a lot in common. They even shared friends who came by, and on their birthdays, they gave each other gifts. They told each other everything. But then, Zena became pregnant, and Rhea found herself consumed with hatred. She couldn't bear to be in the same apartment as the pregnant woman, and even found excuses to stay out late. She couldn't sleep because she kept hearing a man's voice coming from Zena's room. She imagined she heard them talking and moving about, when in fact, Zena was living there all by herself. Zena, on the other hand, grew more and more attached to Rhea. She even told her how wonderful it was to have a neighbor like her, practically an older sister, who would never leave her alone in her time of need. And Rhea did in fact help her friends sew clothes in anticipation of the newborn. She drove Zena to the hospital when the time came. But she didn't come to pick her up after the birth, so that Zena had to stay in the hospital an extra day and ended up taking the baby home wrapped in a ragged hospital blanket that she promised to return right away. Rhea explained that she hadn't been feeling well, and in the weeks that followed she didn't once go to the store for Zena or help her bathe the baby, but just sat in her room with a warm compress over her shoulders. She wouldn't even look at the baby. Though Zena often took the girl to the bath or kitchen or just out for a walk and kept the door open as if to say, "Come look." Before the baby came, Zena learned how to use the sewing machine and began to work from home. She had no family to help her, and as for her once kind neighbor, well, deep down Zena knew that there was no one she could count on but herself. It had been her idea to have the baby, and it was her burden to bear. When the girl was very little, Zena could take finished clothes to the shop while the baby slept. But the baby got bigger and slept less. Zena's problems began, and she had to take the girl with her everywhere. Rhea continued to complain about her bad joints and even took time off work, but Zena wouldn't dare ask her to babysit. Meanwhile, Rhea was planning the girl's murder. More and more often as Zena carried the girl through the apartment, she would notice a canister on the floor filled with what was supposed to be water, or a steaming kettle left precariously balanced on a stool. But still, she didn't suspect anything. She continued to play with her daughter just as happily as before, chirping to her, "Say, Mommy! Say, Mommy!" It's true, though, that when leaving for the store to drop off her work, Zena began locking the door to her room. This infuriated Rhea. One time when Zena left, the girl woke up and fell out of her crib. At least that's what it sounded like to Rhea. Rhea had heard something crash in Zena's room, and then the girl started crying. Rhea knew that the girl didn't yet walk well on her own, and she must have been badly hurt because she was emitting terrible cries on the other side of the door. Rhea couldn't bear them anymore, so she finally put on some rubber gloves, poured bleach into a bucket, and began mopping the floors with it, making sure to splash as much as possible under the girl's door. The cries turned into a heart-wrenching scream. Rhea finished mopping, then washed everything, the bucket, the mop, the gloves, got dressed, and went to a doctor's appointment, and then a movie, and then to the stores, and didn't come back until very late. It was dark and quiet behind the door to Zena's room. Rhea watched a little bit of television and went to bed. She couldn't sleep. Zena was gone all night and all of the next day, and Rhea couldn't stand it anymore. She took an axe and broke down the door and found the room covered with a thin film of dust, with dried spots of blood next to the crib and a widening trail of blood to the door. There was no trace of the bleach. Rhea washed her neighbor's floor, cleaned the room, and sat down to wait, feeling great anticipation. Finally, after a whole week, Zena came back home. She said that she had buried her girl and found work on a night shift. That was all she said. Her dark and sunken eyes and her sallow, haggard skin spoke for themselves. Rhea made no attempt to console her neighbor, and life in the apartment came to a standstill. Rhea watched television alone while Zena went to work nights and then slept during the day. She seemed to have gone mad from grief and hung photos of her little daughter everywhere. The inflammation in Rhea's joints grew worse. She couldn't raise her arms or even walk, and the shots the doctors gave her no longer helped. In the end, Rhea couldn't even make herself dinner or put water onto a boil. When Zena was home, she'd feed Rhea herself, but she was home less and less, explaining that it was too painful for her to be there, and when her daughter had died. Rhea could no longer sleep because of the pain in her shoulders. When she learned that Zena was working in a hospital, she asked her for a strong painkiller. Morphine, if possible. Zena said she couldn't do it. "I don't smuggle drugs," she said. "Then I need to take more of these pills," Rhea said. "Give me 30. "No, I'm not helping you die." "But I can't do it myself," Rhea pleaded. "You won't get off so easy," Zena said. So with a superhuman effort, the sick woman lifted the bottle of pills to her mouth, removed the cap, and spilled the entire contents down her throat. Zena sat by the bed. Rhea took her time dying. When the sun came up, Zena finally said, "Now you listen to me. I lied to you. My little girl is alive and well. She's at a preschool, and I work there as a cleaning lady. The stuff you spilled under the door wasn't bleach. It was baking soda. I switched the cans. The blood on the floor was from Lena bumping her nose when she fell out of bed, so it's not your fault. Nothing is your fault. But neither is anything my fault. We're even." And here, on the face of the dying woman, she saw a smile slowly dawn.